Great, good morning. Bom dia, everyone. Welcome, bem-vindo to the McHarg Center at the Weitzman School of Design here at the University of Pennsylvania. I'm Catherine Seavitt, Meyerson Professor and Chair of the Department of Landscape Architecture here at Weitzman. I also serve, along with our Dean Fritz Steiner, as the Faculty Co-Director of the E&L McHarg Center for Urbanism and Ecology, our department's faculty research center, and one of the many sponsors of this extraordinary international convening, Architectures and Ecologies of Amazonia. Supporting transdisciplinary research and public dialogue with scholars, students, communities, and practitioners, the McHarg Center provides a global platform for ecological thinking and innovative design across multiple scales of the landscape. With this work, we seek to empower landscape architects and planners to meet current and future challenges to life on Earth. And we recognize and acknowledge that we are doing that global work here, locally, in Lenape-Hoking, the ancestral homeland and waters of the Lenape peoples. As designers, thinkers, dreamers, and world builders, we endeavor to build in ways that lead toward justice, and we are committed to working to dismantle the ongoing consequences of settler colonialism. Our pasts, presents, and futures are intertwined, locally and globally. Everything is connected to everything else. Thus, we are all Amazonia. I'd like to speak here briefly about our title, Architectures and Ecologies of Amazonia. This, of course, addresses the interdisciplinary nature of our gathering, an intentional bridging of our disciplines, moving across and between the Department of Landscape Architecture and the Department of Architecture. And with that, I'd like to acknowledge my fellow chair, colleague, and friend, Rosanna Hu, who serves as the Miller Professor and Chair of the Department of Architecture. Like the extraordinary Vanessa Grossman, who is truly the magnetic vortex around whom this symposium is swirling, and Fernando Lara, who has been engaged in our collective Amazonian conversations for over a year now, we are each relatively new to the institution of Penn and to our respective departments. Vanessa, Fernando, and I arrived together in the fall of 2023, and Rosanna in the spring of 2024. But of course, in that pluriverse of thoughts and the many entangled threads of our disciplines and our scholarship, our paths have crossed and intersected in many ways for decades. I'm grateful to each of you for your thinking and your camaraderie, and for the deepening of our friendships. You've truly led me to think in radically new ways, and I can't share enough gratitude, I will say as well, to our incredible department administrative staff who have supported the planning and the execution of this event above and beyond. Eric Barata, Ray Zarate, Aaron Abzarni, Maria Dantas, Michelle Saunders, Cynthia Waybark, Anthony Gahagan, and Adio Royster, and many, many more across the school. But that takes me back to our Amazonia title, Architectures and Ecologies. Both words are intentionally plural. Plurality can engender transdisciplinary integration and scholarship. It is open, it broadens the conversation. Embedded in both architectures and ecologies are these ideas of system openness, human and more than human agencies and processes, open-ended dynamics, and multiple pathways of change. We will explore these pathways and ideas across 3 panels today as we investigate the forest. Forest environments, forest spaces, and forest experiences. The work of our students has enriched our conversations multifold. Jonathan Benetzi and Ryan Lane have designed and curated an extraordinary exhibit of this work across the plaza in Meyerson Hall. Please do not miss it. It's right across the plaza. And among the many voices present today for these conversations and connections, we are so thrilled to have 3 very special guests today with us to enrich our panel discussions with keynotes and with film. Banda Witoto, the indigenous climate activist, educator, and leader from Manaus, the filmmaker and PhD candidate at the University of Coimbra, Priscila Brazil, from Belém do Pará, and the philosopher Emmanuel Icocha, associate professor at the École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales in Paris, France. We're delighted to welcome you all here to the University of Pennsylvania and to Philadelphia. With all of you, we support the ongoing construction and acknowledgement of a pluriverse, and I recognize the anthropologist Arturo Escobar here. We inhabit and design in a world in which many different worlds coexist, each with its own cosmology and ontology. We are not singular, universalizing, or linear. We don't walk in a straight line. We see, sense, build, and relate in many different ways. It is with this construct and framing that I welcome all of you to think, consider, and embrace Amazonia in all its complexity, its power, and its precious fragility. Welcome again to Architectures and Ecologies of Amazonia, and I'm delighted to now invite Vanessa Grossman to the podium. Vanessa, você.
Good morning, bom dia. Welcome to Architectures and Ecologies of Amazonia. It's both an honor and a joy to have you all here today. I'm deeply grateful to our participants as well as our distinguished moderators and speakers whose expertise will make today's discussions truly significant. Together we will engage in a meaningful dialogue about the Amazonia, a topic that has the power to unite us all. For more than 2 decades, my work as a researcher, historian, professor, and curator has centered on architecture's role as a political tool in the fight for social justice. A significant portion of my research focuses on the Cold War, an era I'm not certain has truly come to an end. In Brazil, where I was born and raised, it culminated in a US-backed military dictatorship, a period that saw the Amazon rainforest destructions reach a critical peak. An ongoing crisis whose effects have only deepened over time. Slogans like "the Amazon is gone" or "New Brazil, relying on the Amazon," "Here we want the forest." I witnessed the supposed end of this dictatorship firsthand in the mid-80s as a child in the Amazon. My interest in the Amazon is deeply personal and autobiographical. When I was just under 5 years old, I lived with my parents and sisters in Carajás, a company town in the Carajás mountain range in northeastern Brazil, located at the eastern edge of a vast forest in the state of Pará. Carajás lies within what has since become a central area of Amazon deforestation. The town was named after an indigenous group that once inhabited the region spanning Goiás, Pará, and Mato Grosso, states of what we now call Brazil. I lived there from 85, the year of Brazil's redemocratization, until 1987. My father, a civil engineer, was tasked with building the urban core of this town, 450 houses and schools for the future workers of what would become the world's largest iron ore mine, a project initiated by the Brazilian military in the heart of the Amazon. We lived in a temporary city of prefab timber homes nestled deep within the forest. All I remember is feeling profoundly happy there. Surrounded by lush greenery, everything around me felt very vast and awe-inspiring. So this is my sister and I here, and this is the acronym of the Companhia Vale do Rio Doce. Now it was privatized, called Vale SA, which was really the big power behind this project. While I can't be sure if that sense of wonder came purely from childhood, I believe it was a combination of both. The immense scale of the Amazon in that part of the forest and my youthful perspective. However, we were living in a controlled company town on the edge of the frontier, and I use that term critically, as part of an internal colonization project driven by geopolitical and economic forces. My experiences and memories of the Amazon are deeply embodied, intertwining its histories and ecologies with my own. While my childhood there was filled with joy, it was also shadowed by the disrepair I witnessed. One image that has stayed with me is not only the joy of playing with cipó, vines clinging to towering trees, but also the sorrow of seeing animals, snakes, turtles, panthers, sloths, macaws, wandering across the newly built roads. They seemed lost on the asphalt, unsure of where to go and sometimes captured by my father's co-workers, and later returned to the Zoo Botanical Park. The vast forest, once so expansive, was gradually being consumed by concrete, something I would later study as a researcher and scholar. While living in the Amazon, not by chance, I had the chance to visit Brazil's new capital. It was my first time in Brasilia, which was, in fact, an entry point indeed for the development of the forest. And where were the Carajá people? I never saw them. I asked my father if he had encountered any indigenous people during our time there, and he said he had not. However, he did recall seeing signs that read, "Do not stop the car, dangerous Indians." What is striking about Carajás and where we stand today is that the discovery of one of the world's largest iron ore deposits in a remote corner of the Amazon was, in many ways, accidental. It was also deeply intertwined with US history, or industrial history, particularly the history of Pennsylvania in the Rust Belt. In 1967, a Brazilian geologist prospecting for manganese on behalf of US Steel stumbled upon the deposit, a fascinating connection, for me at least, because I'm here today, especially since the US Steel is based in Pittsburgh, bringing me full circle to where I am right now. This image, captured by NASA's EO-1 satellite in 2009 using the Advanced Land Imager, shows the region my father helped shape, a company town with a geometric, almost square layout. The reddish-brown earth contrasts sharply with the lush green of the surrounding rainforest. Launched in the 80s, the Grande Carajás project, Big Carajás project, fundamentally transformed the socio-environmental landscape of the Amazon, particularly in the mountain range from which it takes its name. The mine of iron ore, the construction of steel mills, the railroad, the extensive energy infrastructure, including the building of hydroelectric dams and the production of and burning of coal in blast furnaces, have left a profound and lasting impact on the region's ecosystem. My father, who was an excellent, ethical, hardworking civil engineer of whom I'm very proud, was so young in his early 20s when I was born. He was drawn to the Amazon at age 27 by a bold project, framed as both a symbol of progress and a way to reduce the economic dependency of a country that now we call part of the Global South during the final years of the Cold War. With 2 children to raise amid rampant inflation, high unemployment, and an economic crisis sweeping much of Latin America, the move presented itself as a promising opportunity. In this context, I see myself as part of a still taboo chapter in Brazil's history, one shaped by profound social challenges and deeply entangled with the complex anthropogenic legacy of the Amazon. Those who contribute to the destruction of the forest and threaten indigenous communities are often vulnerable themselves in Brazil, more so than a newly graduate engineer like my father or the construction workers involved in Carajás. After the military government launched its March to the West, a project reminiscent of the United States westward expansion, even more people were drawn to the Amazon in search of opportunity. This has created a vicious cycle. Deforestation fuels poverty, and poverty in turn drives further deforestation. The consequences of this cycle are far-reaching. If the Amazon were to disappear, the impact would be catastrophic for all living beings. While my personal trajectory is intertwined with the Amazon's rainforest, I now, with humility, feel it is time to engage with it not only intellectual but also in solidarity, interweaving diverse histories, ecologies, and cosmologies in all their plural form. This engagement must shift the paradigm from one of exploitation to one of coexistence and kinship, acknowledging the more than human as sentient and relational. Our first keynote speaker, Wanda Witoto, our Perry World House international visitor, is one of Brazil's leading indigenous voices who embodies the resilience of her community in the face of all I accounted for until this moment, and of course now climate change. As the leader of the Witoto people in Brazil, whose spirit is symbolized by the ant, Wanda carries the indigenous name Derekini, meaning wild ant. The Witoto's traditions and values are deeply inspired by the life of ants, which represent cooperation, community, and interconnectedness. Our final keynote speaker, philosopher Emanuele Coccia, reminds us that our breath continually connects us to all living beings through a shared atmosphere, what he calls the space of mixture. And although he was invited but is not here, I want to evoke indigenous leader, environmentalist, philosopher, poet, and writer Ailton Krenak, who is an interlocutor for Emanuele and vice versa, who expands on the concept of florestania, making the forest exist within us, in our homes, and our yards. Krenak teaches us that the forest is not only our past, but also our ancestral future, urging us to recognize our connection to it as a living, breathing reality. In addition to Witoto, Coccia, and our other distinguished speakers, and I have to say that we have 3 Amazonian women here today who will share their experiences, their research, their militance, their creative work with us. It is a great honor to have also with us today cultural anthropologist and ethnobiologist William Ballet, professor at Tulane University, alongside archaeologist and professor emeritus of anthropology at Penn, Clark Erickson. Their extensive work underscores that it's not only the destruction of the forest that is anthropogenic, but much of Amazonia's rich ecological tapestry, shaped by the history, culture, and knowledge systems of indigenous peoples and their native agriculture. This perspective offers profound insights into environmental change and biodiversity, deeply aligning with Krenac's powerful assertions that the forest is not just our past, but also our ancestral future. Speaking of the future, I am excited to introduce our three moderators who are integral members of our community. From the outset, we wanted to actively engage with our students in this conversation, inviting them to share their reflections on the Amazon and our planetary future from their distinct and lived perspectives. Marcos Salazar Valle is an Ecuadorian architect and a first-year PhD student in History and Theory of Architecture at the Weitzman School of Design at the University of Pennsylvania. His research interest is to examine spatial practices of colonial extraction, collection, and development that overlap in the epistemic and material construction of rurality and indigeneity as the order of modernity in the Andean region. To this aim, he is starting to look at 18th century European scientific excursions, archaeological practices in the early 20th century, and developmental projects in the post-war period. He has previously worked on several architectural projects in Quito, Otavalo, and Cayambe, Ecuador, as well as a professor at the Universidad Central and Universidad Católica in Quito, Ecuador. Dagny Elise Carlson is a second-year dual master's candidate in architecture and landscape architecture at the University of Pennsylvania. Dagny Elise is a citizen of the Cherokee Nation and the Shawnee tribe, and as a Weitzman scholar, she draws on this background to develop and diversity her own practice. Dagny Elise's research interests are focused on reciprocal co-design strategies and storytelling in indigenous American architectural practices. Before Penn, she led Stanford University's first course on indigenous architecture, CEE 32XSI, Sustainable Design and Practice in Native American Architecture. While at Penn, Dagny Elise has worked with Penn Praxis and the Rampo Lenape Turtle Clan to design a new plan for their community. She is currently secretary for the American Indian Working Group for the City of Philadelphia, the precedent to a forthcoming mayoral commission. Clarice Figueiredo is a Brazilian architect and urbanist, currently pursuing a PhD in the history and theory of architecture as a presidential fellow at the Department of Architecture at the University of Pennsylvania Stuart Weitzman School of Design. Her research interests lie at the intersection of architecture, landscape, and extraction, exploring the complicity of architecture in shaping material, ontological, and epistemological landscapes, particularly in Brazil's northeast and north regions. Recently, she has focused on the filmographic archives produced by the Brazilian dictatorship during the Cold War period. Before beginning her PhD, Clarice conducted research in the Brazilian Amazon as part of the Master of Science in Critical, Curatorial, and Conceptual Practices in Architecture program at Columbia University. She was honored with the CCCP, the acronym of this program, award for her significant contributions to research, practice, and the public sphere. Her master's thesis examined the relationship between monument architecture and the encroachment of illegal gold mining on indigenous lands, addressing issues of environmental toxicity and non-Western cosmologies. Last but certainly not least, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to Miller Professor and Chair of the Department of Architecture, Rosanna Hu, the Dean of the Weitzman School of Design, Professor Fritz Steiner, for their unwavering support of this event. My deepest thanks also go to Martin and Margy Meyerson Professor of Urbanism and Chair of Landscape Architecture, Catherine Seavitt, whose brilliant suggestions to organize this event as a cross-departmental collaboration laid the foundation for everything we are experiencing today. This idea emerged from our discussion surrounding my seminar, Forest Histories, Architectures of Amazonia, which now has a different title, Amazonian Landscapes and Forest Histories of Architecture, which was deeply inspired by Catherine's work on landscape architect Roberto Burle Marx and Brazilian forests. Catherine not only championed the seminar, but also contributed as an outstanding guest lecturer. She shares my profound passion for Brazil and brings true rigor, joy, erudition, and authenticity to her approach to ecological knowledge and design. Working with her has been an absolute privilege. With great joy, I extend my deepest thanks to Professor Fernando Lara, Associate Professor Christina Lyons, and Associate Professor Franca Trubiano, and the Associate Director of the Center for Latin American and Latin Studies, Catherine Bartsch, for their invaluable collaboration and support. Since last summer, Catherine Bartsch gently took my hand and guided me through the various programs and grants offered at Penn. I also want to thank the amazing master students Annan Lee, Jonathan Bonazzi, and Ryan Lane. Jonathan and Ryan's talent, dedication, and enthusiasm brought the symposium's graphics and exhibition to life, while Annan Lee is the talented artist behind the print that gave the symposium its unique identity, inspired by the work of Burle Marx and, of course, the work of Catherine. And she made more prints that you can see in the exhibition across the plaza. This symposium has been an incredible opportunity to collaborate with so many exceptional members of the Weitzman community and the broader university. As part of the programs that sponsor this event, I would like to offer special thanks to the board of the Penn McHarg Center for Urbanism and Ecology, the Penn Office of the Provost for Research, Chris Klaniecki and Penn Global, Tara Medeiros and the Penn Perry World House, Professor Catherine M. Moore for her support through Native American and Indigenous Studies at Penn, Professor Deborah A. Thomas for her support through the Department of Anthropology and the Center for Experimental Ethnography, and Associate Professor Jorge Teles, Director of the Center for Latin American and Latin Studies, for their exceptional support. I also thank Professor Tulia Faletti from the Department of Political Science, Adjunct Associate Professor Simon Martin in Anthropology, and Associate Curator of African Collections at Penn Museum, Vanicleia Silva Santos, for their equal support. I would also like to express my sincere gratitude to the many individuals whose hard work made this possible at Weitzman. A heartfelt thank you to Eric Barata, Nadine Beanwar, John Caperton, Christopher Cook, Maria Dantes, Michael Grant, Jeffrey Glane, Brandon Orselli, Andy Garrigan, Adio Roster, Jessica De Jesus, Sandra Mosco, Erin Obzarni, Michelle Sanders, Jennifer Lee Sorrentino, Cynthia Weibark, and Rai Zarate. I recognize how busy each of you are, and I truly appreciate the dedication and teamwork you all brought to this effort. Your commitment was invaluable. I also want to thank the Brazil Lab at my alma mater, Princeton University, particularly the researchers Miqueias H. Mug and Rodrigo Simón de Moraes, who is one of our great speakers today. Thank you so much. I would also like to thank Professor Marco Cereto, who is a professor at the Federal University of Amazonas in Manaus, and the founder of Núcleo Arquitetura Moderna na Amazônia, NAMA, who is a very important partner in this symposium and who is represented today by our great Amazonian woman who is here, Isabela de Bonis, who will speak about her research and about NAMA, and she is a doctoral candidate at the University of São Paulo. Thank you so much. Thank you all.